Hi, welcome to the Good Grazing Makes Sense channel. My name is David Voth, and I'm a producer here in northeastern Nevada. I'm also a member of the Society for Rangeland Management, and they've asked me to help narrate through these videos as we talk about economically feasible ways to enhance rangeland production. Today we're going to talk about 5 quick assessments that you can use to evaluate your grazing management. Those 5 assessments are available forage, bare ground, signs of erosion, visible trailing, and animal condition. Now when we talk about available forage, this is nothing new to producers. Depending on the time of year and what your objectives are, you drive in the field, look at how much forage is there for the upcoming grazing season, or if you're in the middle of your grazing season, how much forage is there left, and should you leave? Should you stay for a little bit longer? We're going to get into utilization in another video. This can be kind of a hot topic, especially for those of us who make our livings grazing on public lands. But basically, when we're talking about utilization, we're going to keep it at a high level. How much of this year's growth is left available to graze or use in some fashion? But we also want to look at the diversity, the composition that goes into what plants are there and available for not just your livestock, but also wildlife. One of the things I look for is how those plants are being grazed, those specific plants are being grazed. For me, where I'm at, if I see that my Great Basin wild rye is being hit pretty hard in the fall, chances are pretty good that I've already kind of taken the cream out of the field already. And sometimes that plant may need to be hit hard. And if that's my objective, that's okay. But there's certain plants at certain times of year that animals don't really like to go to. And when they're going to those plants and hitting them pretty hard, I take that as a sign that I have probably overgrazed some of my more desirable plants early on that year. And when I say overgraze, what I'm really talking about is the amount of times that animal has gone back to that same plant before it has had a chance to regrow. The next key indicator is bare ground. Now keep in mind, this varies drastically on where you live. Here in northeastern Nevada, we would expect to see a certain amount of bare ground depending on the ecosystem we're in. Where maybe Montana or California, someplace where you're expecting to see a lot less bare ground. Either way, a bare ground comparison to what you think should be there is a key indicator of how your grazing management is going.
As far as indicators go, I kind of mentioned the bare ground aspect, and I guess one of the reasons that I look at that is because Mother Nature is trying to armor herself, cover herself with vegetation, and so I want to get an idea when I first get out to a place, like what am I dealing with here? If it's a high percentage of bare ground that I'm seeing, okay, then my goal is to try and start getting a few more species to show up in these areas. If I got 50% bare ground, my goal, just short term maybe, is in the next couple of years, I want to get that to like 45%. Because if you figure on a landscape scale like this, if you start getting a few more like tillers of grass coming into these areas, you're up in your production. And granted, it's going to be tougher on a drought year, and especially more in your more arid areas, but filling those spaces in, those bare ground spaces in, means that you could potentially be moving in the right direction. And so we start there, we look at it and we say, all right, here's our baseline, but everybody wants to have good production, up their numbers, and that's where you start, is right there at the bare ground, because that's where your plants are going to grow from.
At the end of the day, this bare ground matters quite a bit in terms of erosion potential, which leads right into our next indicator, visible signs of erosion. When looking for signs of erosion, there's first 2 ways we can get erosion. One from wind, one from water. Looking at different water flow patterns across the rangeland, Is water hitting the ground and then rushing right off? Or is it running into lots of different plants along the way, slowing down that water before it reaches its final destination and soaking into the ground before it has a chance to race right off? Are we seeing pedestaling, where water hits the ground, runs around a plant, causing that plant to look like it's on a pedestal? In either case, this erosion takes that important topsoil and washes it away, leaving us with a less nutrient dense soil and a less live soil to work with in terms of getting our plant health back together. Evidence of trailing. This is the fourth indicator we've come up with, and this one may be a hot topic, and I would expect some chatter in the feedback box, because when I think of visible trailing in Nevada, we have long distances that cattle have to go to water, and quite a few cattle in a herd, whereas in California you've got much shorter steps between water and, generally speaking, much smaller herds. So if you were to Google Earth any pasture in Nevada, you're going to see some visible trailing signs. But what happens when you make those trails? It doesn't really matter where you're at. Water can hit those trails and keep moving down, causing that third factor we talked about, erosion. Either way, when we're talking about evidence of trailing, it's a good indicator that water is too far apart, that cattle are having to go from one end of the pasture to the same water source over and over again instead of hitting water here or hitting water there. This one really comes down to your objectives and where you're from. Animal condition, the fifth and final quick indicator of grazing performance in this year. And this one is pretty obvious. When you start losing condition on your cattle, you're probably already too late and have already grazed. The problem with animal condition is a lagging indicator. If your cows are skinny, you probably should have moved quite a while ago, or skinnier than where you want them to be.